Great. Well, let's go ahead and get the presentation started. Thank you all for attending. I noticed that we have, as many of you know, we're doing a webinar series, and we have a number of our attendants from yesterday that are participating today. So we greatly appreciate you taking the time out for this. In this presentation, we're going to talk about controlled unclassified information. You know, what is it and how to protect it? And how does it affect your organization? So briefly, I'm Tom Leahy. I'm the Senior Vice President of Sales and Business Development with SureShield. I have colleagues on the phone or on the presentation with me that will be available to answer questions as we get to the end of the presentation. We all have been involved in the security, safety, and compliance industry for close to 30 years apiece, so a lot of institutional knowledge and experience in dealing with a lot of the things that you're working with as it relates to servicing contracts and making sure that we're in compliance with those particular contracts. Let me go ahead. Sorry, I'm just going to turn my email off here so we don't get interrupted. And that was. I'm going to speak a little bit about what are some of the accreditation requirements. So there will be a little bit of repeat from yesterday's presentation for those of you who joined us yesterday. And then specifically, we're going to talk about one area related to that, which is the controlled unclassified information, kind of what it is, what you should be doing with that, what is expected for you to be doing with that, and how to protect it. We'll talk a little bit about how to identify it and what needs to be done. And there's some resources that we also have for you if you're not marking or making sure that things are marked, to give you information on how to properly do that, and we'll direct you to those resources. We're then going to show some other technology that is available by our company SureShield to assist in that process. We'll go into a brief demonstration of that product. We'll take questions at the end of the presentation. And again, for those of you who are interested, we are going to be offering a free trial of that particular solution. I'll just make a note for those of you who perhaps attended yesterday's presentation. If you haven't done so already, you should have received an activation to the ComplyShield software. And please go ahead and make sure you get that activated and start on that. And gentlemen, I'm going to ask my colleagues who are on to monitor the chat as I see some questions coming up, but I don't want to interrupt the presentation. So chime in if there's anything on the chat that needs to be done. And then just lastly, at the end of the presentation on the Q&A, you'll notice on your Zoom toolbar, there's a question and answer section. Please go ahead and enter your questions. You can do that at any time. However, we'll go ahead and address those at the end of the presentation. So let's go ahead and get started. Sorry, I'm just going to get rid of something here. Again, we're talking a little bit for those of you that are servicing the Department of Defense and are part of the Defense Industrial Base. As you know, providers who are working with the DoD, they need to complete a NIST 800-171 assessment. We've also talked briefly about what will be coming down the line with CMMC, but the components of that assessment and the overall compliance requirements include submitting a score to the SPRS, creating a system security plan or developing a system security plan as to how you're going to be, your organization is protecting this critical data, a plan of action, a milestone report for those that are not necessarily in compliance, and submitting that as well. But the overall importance of this is the demonstration that you have systems in place to protect the CUI data that may be provided to you. And this affects all 300,000 providers that are part of the Defense Industrial Base. And the CUI is, as you know, is controlled unclassified information, critical, sensitive data that needs to have assurances that they will be protected. You also know that coming on the heels of NIST 800-171 is CMMC. It was put into place because there are and continue to be issues with the NIST 800-171 process, meaning that particular process was all what we would call a self-assessment and voluntary. And there were instances of providers who were indicating that they were in compliance and really weren't, and this has resulted in some of the attacks that have taken place. So they've upped the ante in the game to introduce an accreditation board under CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model, that in the future is going to have most of the components that are in the NIST 800-171 with some additional what we call practices on top of that. And it is going to go to a third-party audit process. There's a lot of similarities between both of these programs. NIST 800-171 is actually a subset of the CMMC audit process. And some of the differences with CMMC is they've classified them at different levels from what we would call level 1 all the way up to level 5. And those levels are an indication of the sensitivity of the information or data that may be provided to you as a provider or are part of the overall contract that the Defense Department has initiated. So depending upon what it is that's being worked on, they come at different classification levels. And to date, there's currently 20 approved what they call certified third-party accreditation organizations that have been formed. And there are more that are coming into, that are getting that approval and will be ones that you will be able to choose or work with when you begin that process of the accreditation process. So specifically, we're going to focus in on one of the areas that's around the controlled unclassified information components and what that is and what that means. So CUI is really an umbrella term that encompasses all the what they would call classified defense information and controlled technical information. Those continue to be terms that oftentimes are used, but basically it's a new way to encompass what they would call sensitive data. And believe it or not, they've actually made it a little bit simpler than what it used to be. But controlled on the type of information that could be under this umbrella includes your unclassified controlled technical information, sensitive but classified information, for official use only, law enforcement type stuff. So they are working on combining all of that under a different category that's CUI and subcategories of that CUI. So any and all of this information that you receive or you create needs to have controls in place to show that it is properly protected and cannot be, obviously putting protections in place to keep it from being able to be stolen. Anything that is CUI information is marked or identified, should be marked or identified in a government contract or provided to the government contractor by the DoD. That's in connection with that contract. So if you are handling information or in the agreements that you have, you should have received, and of course this can change because it's evolving as well, but information that's provided by you in that contract through the contractor, being the DoD, should have a marking or a classification on it indicating the sensitivity of that document or that information. And it can be in a variety of different things. It could be in Word documents, it can be in PowerPoints, it can be in schematics that are provided to you, it can be in diagrams. So needless to say, it's very expansive and oftentimes very difficult to be able to identify. The other thing that's important, particularly for you who are contractors, working with them, is it can also be content that's developed by you as a contractor during the performance of a contract. And it's very important that if indeed that is the case, that you again are making sure you're putting proper markings on that information and that content to mark it as CUI in the appropriate areas, and to make sure, just as importantly, that you have security processes in place to protect that very sensitive information. So all documents containing CUI are required to be marked. And again, it's as we've seen over the course of the last year or so, it's I guess an evolving process, because this is not always being done. And as such, it's hard to identify your CUI if you haven't marked it as CUI. So I wanted to make a note. We are going to, of course, provide this presentation to and content to all of you who are participating today, along with a recording of this presentation. But there is a nice marking guidance handbook here, and I've provided you the reference to that handbook that gives you information on how to properly mark documents with the appropriate categories and subcategories. So before I go on to the next, I'm going to take just a brief little probe and just ask a quick question to those who are participating if you're handling sensitive information. And the question is, are you all marking your CUI data? And Sanjay and Chandi, it looks like it is operating appropriately today.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm just going to give the participants a few minutes, a few more seconds to go ahead and answer. And then we'll go ahead and stop the poll. And I will end it and go ahead and share with the folks. Not everybody that's on has answered, but it's actually kind of interesting that more than 68% are indicating right now that they're not marking their data, and 7% are. I'm assuming that could be for one of two purposes. Either you are not collecting that type of data, or don't believe you're collecting that type of data, or you're not required to. And of course, those that are answering yes, I'm assuming, are handling sensitive information. So interesting results. Let's go on to the next area. And of course, as we know, NIST and CMMC require that a Defense Industrial Base vendor identify, mark, and implement processes to protect that data. It requires your organization to identify all CUI data and its particular location, establish processes that you should be put in place to assure the protection of this information. That's a compliance regulation. And you'll need to demonstrate that your organization has proper controls in place. And it's often difficult to find where this data, as you know, where this data resides. And you'll need to update all documents to determine if proper marks exist. So for those of you who answered no, we would encourage you to go back and look at information that you have and make sure that it is not something that would fit into those categories, and properly mark it. So before I go on to the next, I'm just going to go, just move down one. Take me back to the beginning of the presentation. I'm just going to give a few examples, and then we'll go ahead on into the polls. So these are some examples of documents that are marked, or categorization of documents and markings on documents. So oftentimes, if you receive them at the top of the headers, they should either say controlled or CUI, or controlled CUI with the subcategories that apply to those. this is kind of the commonality amongst those documents when you receive them and or when you are creating them. And again, that marking reference that I provided gives good information on how to go ahead and make sure that these documents you may have the proper markings on them. I'm just going to go back and go to our next brief poll question and ask for those, of course, probably more to those that answered yes, is do you know where all your CUI data resides? Great. And we'll go ahead and it's interesting because we have a number of folks, well, if it may not be all the participants or different participants who answered, but we're getting a higher percentage of saying they know where they reside. Some don't know. I'll go ahead and share the results. And if you do know where it resides, then you know at least some things you can do to help make sure that that data is secure. So I'm going to go ahead and close this and move on to a solution that we have that can help you with this. And I'll preface this by saying, for those of you that are not marking your documents, and I can preface that even with this application because it goes beyond just things that are considered CUI. But if you are not doing the markings and you're not marking appropriately, of course, you'll have difficulty finding those that information. But we provide a variety of solutions for those of you who participated yesterday. We talked a little bit about our Comply Shield solution that helps you do the overall audits across NIST and CMMC. We also have, and we're going to focus a little bit of time today on a solution set that we have called Hack Shield. And what Hack Shield is an endpoint solution that actually can go out into your environment and identify all of your CUI data, where it resides, what the paths are to that data, and more importantly, then giving you the opportunities to write certain rules on that data to prevent the movement in any improper way. When I say that, you can write rules to indicate how you would allow that data to move. But for instance, if someone was trying to email it off to someone else, it would send and put a particular protection on that data to assure that that cannot be done. And it would put an encryption signature on it. So I'm going to just launch back into our application, and Chandi or Sanjay, I just want to ask you guys to indicate that you can see the SureShield demo screen. Or yep. Okay, great. So I'm going to go in now to a product of ours in this demonstration called the Hack Shield solution. And I'm going to give you a little understanding of how this works from both the front end piece and then the back end piece. So you'll see, if you noticed yesterday, we have links to different solutions that we provide. I'm going into this area called the Hack Shield Manager under this particular customer called Colossal Contracting. And let me just give it a second to load up. And what you'll notice in this particular dashboard as it loads is it's providing to me all of my marked sensitive data. And I wanted to make a point that this data goes beyond just CUI data. It can be protected health information. It can be credit card data, whatever you want to utilize the utility for to identify and mark that information. And then it will tell me exactly where that data resides from a device standpoint, from an application standpoint, from an exfiltration standpoint, being able to see or know where it's moved. And then it even, the way in which we've written some algorithms, or algorithms have been written by our, on this data, have put some levels of sensitivity in terms of cost of that data as well. As we know, for instance, a medical record is worth a certain amount of money, as well as a credit card and the likes. And we try to give some more financial sensitivity, more importantly, the criticality of where this data is and where it resides. And you can see in the dashboard, it also tells me within the different areas in my environment where that particular data is residing. So in this demo, we have a lot of it in, for instance, Dropbox. If I were to go into my dashboard area here, again, I can get the classification name. You'll see in this demo, we have a lot of different sensitive data residing here, but I can go ahead and actually, let's say, just as you can see, we've gone ahead and narrowed that down to all the various types of CMC related classifications and subclassifications. And within there, again, it helps me understand where all this data resides. I want to make a point. So how do we get here? And how do we get to getting this type of output and having this available to me? That happens in what we would call the setup processes. So I'm going to go now into a bit of the back end of this. And you'll note if I come in here, there's what we would call an endpoint that you launch. And that endpoint allows you to then push it out onto all the devices in your environment. You'll see with this particular customer, it's out on a variety. It's showing me of a lot of the different devices that this is out on. I will note that you have a lot of the ability to actually configure and modify even off of those endpoints, which ones you want it to be running on. So in this example, we've uninstalled it on one of the desktop environments, but we're running it on a number of others. And what that ends up generating is part of this as well as what we would call my compliance profile. This compliance profile allows me to indicate and turn on and off the various data that we want it to be looking for. So you can see we've recently turned off the CMMC data in this environment, but in what I was looking at before, it had been running and was identifying that information. But you can see the different things that you have expand beyond just the CUI related data. If you were just using it for that, you would activate it for that. And then it would be going out based upon what we understand of knowing those markings. It will go out and identify all of that information and where it resides. And then lastly, within here, you have the opportunity then to write what we would call policies and data and rules on how you want that information to be moved, accessed, and the likes. So you can see, for instance, on the CUI, CMMC CUI content, I had that turned on. And then I had the ability to write several different rules on this information as to how I want it to be identify information, and then also what I want it to do on that data. So for instance, I want it to be any of this data, if it's going to be moved, to be encrypted and the likes. So that is kind of how it gets set up. It goes out, it starts to look for that information, and then it will tell you where that information resides. I do want to also point out that within this as well, we are not, this is showing me all the different CUI data and what format that is in. I want to note that we're not actually accessing this information. So the system will tell you where that resides and what type of document or file that is, but that document is actually not residing at all in the SureShield system. It's just allowing you to know where that is. And for instance, if you wanted to go take a look at that, you can use the analytics to go look at the path, for instance, as to where that particular data resides. So we give you ways to actually go straight to that information on your own, within your own network, to tell you where that resides, and then write the particular rules you may want to write on that on that data. So what we have found oftentimes is that within, there's a lot of organizations, particularly if you have done some appropriate marking, or you may have documents that you have saved that you don't even realize that the markings are on there. We've had organizations tell us, well, we don't handle any CUI data. And we've gone ahead and run this Hack Shield Manager tool and very quickly help them identify that, yes, indeed, they do have this information and it's residing in areas that they may not want it to be residing in. And more importantly, it may not have some appropriate rules and tools that are placed upon it to prevent it from being inappropriately accessed. So that gives you an overview of the Hack Shield Manager tool, how customers are using it, how it can be used in your case for, this thing keeps going back, sorry, the presentation. As we talked about, it's a web-enabled utility that it will identify all your Mark CUI data, where it resides, what type of files, you can write rules on it, and it assures protection of that data to meet your requirements that are laid out in your system security plan and your NIST and CMMC audit requirements. Obviously on the ROI, it helps lower your cost to meet compliance, but more importantly, make sure that you're protecting that very sensitive data. And it really simplifies the means for identifying that with, as again, I will provide the caveat that if you do not have any of those markings, the system will not be able to necessarily identify that. However, you might use it for some of the other sensitive data you have, credit card data, plan data, PII data, that really is considered that sensitive data, and you can use it to go identify that and perhaps even get to those documents and move back to put the appropriate markings on them as well. So just to summarize, what this particular tool does, of course, is helps meet requirements and forget I would just say the audit and the regulatory requirements. More importantly, the very critical requirements of making sure that any CUI data that you or people you're working with in your environment are working or dealing with is properly protected from infiltration and from hacking, which is, as we've said before, led to even the implementation of the CMMC process. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pause the presentation. I'm going to take one more poll again for those of you who are here, and then we will go ahead and open it up to questions. And we can do that while Sanjay and Chandi, I haven't had a chance to look at these yet, but perhaps you can open up some of the questions while I take the last poll. And as we did yesterday, we're offering a free trial of this solution as well to you or anyone that you feel may want to would have interest in this. I'm just going to ask that quick question as to whether you would be interested in starting a trial of this particular product. And for those of you who answer yes, in the follow-up email, you're going to get, first of all, access to the content of the presentation. You'll get access to the webinar itself, and you will also then keep an eye on that email for a note and an activation that will be sent to you for activating the Hack Shield solution. I would also like to note for those of you that may perhaps were on yesterday and those that are new today, sometimes in a first-time send, this can go into a spam folder. So I would just ask you to make sure if you don't see it, within the next few hours after the presentation, and the follow-up email that you will have received with access to the presentation, to check your spam folders to just make sure it didn't end up in there, so that you can go ahead and activate your trial. And it looks like we have a number of folks on the presentation, that's great, that are interested in getting a free trial of the HackShield solution. I'm going to keep the poll open for right now. Hopefully it's not showing. And we will go ahead and go into now the Q&A part of the questions. And hopefully we've gone ahead and given you back a little bit of your time before this all ends. So I actually, sorry, and Chandi looks like he's answering one of the questions, but we were just told that we have to mark them as CUI. Sorry, can you maybe expand on that, Daniel? If you are, and indeed, if you are marking your data as CUI, then we will be able to identify that. Chandi, did you want to?
The point here is, if we are creating or deriving some content from CUI and creating additional new document, we are responsible for marking it as such.
Correct.
And if the documentation is coming from DoD as it is, there is a guidance within DoD that they should mark. If they have not marked, then it's something that they have overlooked. And if you are aware of it, you can go ahead and add the marking just to be safe.
Okay. And to one of the other questions, how I determine if I receive CUI info if it's never marked as such by the originator. Well, first of all, what I would say, Steve, is depends on who that originator is. Of course, if it's a requirement, or it's at least a stated requirement by the DoD that data that they're providing to any provider or contractor as sensitive should have that proper CUI marking on it. Now, if it's coming from another party, then all I would say and encourage any and all of you is to make sure that you spend at least an extra amount of time to take a look at that information and review it to make sure that there's nothing here that you might consider to be sensitive data. And I apologize, Chandi, it looks like you've been answering some of the questions along as we've gone along. So I don't want to repeat questions that have already been answered. Was there anything on here, Chandi, as you were looking that you want? I know that the group that is all on here, I'm assuming, sees the answers to these questions.
Yes.
All these questions? Okay. But is there anything else in particular that you want to point out with some of the questions that have been asked?
I think the common theme has been that the source documentation does not have the markings required to tag it as CUI.
Right, right. And you're not alone in that. There's a number that have said that. Although, as we can see from those that are participating, we know that we have some, and perhaps it could be to the degree of sensitivity of the agreements you're working on, that are indicating, first of all, that they are marking, or they're having marked data, they know where that data resides, and they're putting appropriate controls on it. So it sounds a little bit like, I would say, a mixed bag in the sense that even the government themselves is getting probably more sensitive and up to date in making sure that proper processes are in place. So you should expect at a minimum that anything new or updated that is coming out and has that kind of information on it will be marked as such appropriately so that you can take it. We have also heard folks that have gotten information where they've taken those headings off, and that's created, potential issues for them as well. Again, one other thing that you can do, as we mentioned, if you are going to launch the HackShield utility, is it does also, you can indicate other types of sensitive data you want it to be looking for. And oftentimes there could be some correlation to that data. So as I mentioned before, you have things like PHI, credit card data, PII data, that it will also, if you've activated, will look for, and then it will direct you to where those documents are the paths of those documents, and you can look at those documents and determine these actually should also probably have a CUI or marking if they were being used in a government or defense contract related service. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. It looks like we have about 16 of our attendees that have indicated they would like access to the Hack Shield product. So for those of you that have indicated you would like access, your email a follow-up will go ahead and indicate as such that you will be receiving an activation key. And then certainly there's also information on a info@sureshield.com that allows you, if you need some help in getting that setup done, we can assist you with that.
Yeah. And Tom, just as a reminder to folks, I know that a number of the folks probably that are attending today's webinar also attended yesterday's webinar. So, and I know that a number of those folks had indicated interest in the free trial of that particular product as well. So please look within your spam folder. And if you did not get an email from us, please let us know just by sending an email directly to info@sureshield.com.
Yes, please, because we're just wanting to make sure that there was nothing lost in the cracks as it's gone out, because we've had, great attendance on these meetings and want to make sure you're getting the content and the information that you all asked for. So with that, if there aren't any other questions, we'll go ahead and close the session. Hopefully bought you back a little bit of time, but also brought you some things of value to you. Keep an eye out for that follow-up. And please go ahead for those, like we said yesterday, that may indicate an interest in the Comply Shield, go ahead and check for those activations if you haven't already. And then keep an eye out for the ones today for the Hack Shield. And we look forward to getting you all started and assisting you, overall in this process.
Yeah, one more point, Tom.
Yes.
So for people who have opted for Comply Shield trial and also want the Hack Shield, so it will be just an add-on service. They won't get a new activation.
Okay.
So if you have asked for both, just look in the system, you'll have both on the menus.
Yes, yes. So as John D pointed out, we provide a platform. So it's just a matter of activating other solutions on that platform. So if you were one, yesterday that was interested in and received the email for Comply Shield and you would like the Hack Shield, you will see that will actually also be activated for you. So again, encourage you to just, if you haven't received it, one, let us know, and two, check spam folders just in case. And then we're just getting a question, Chandi, about how long do we have before we have to activate. It's a 30-day trial. We would, encourage you to, you don't have to do it right away. I think it would just be helpful to us to know that you intend to do so. But from the point of activation, Chandi, is that when the 30-day window starts? Is that correct?
That's correct, from the time of activation.
Yeah. Great. So again, thank you, everybody. We appreciate your time in attending and look forward to working with you. All the best, and thanks for coming to the presentation.